Rio was a kid often looked down upon, ugly, disgusting, and useless. But who would have thought that Rio would actually receive divine protection from God, sacrificing his life to manifest a blazing aura? That aura was like a flame that burned the Demon King to ashes, consuming everything until nothing remained. He wasn't just an ordinary kid, but rather the embodiment of the legendary guardian who was the only one to succeed in driving away the Demon King's entire army 1,000 years ago. With his sacred spear, he managed to destroy them all, even though the Demon King found it amusing, like a worthless monkey. Unfortunately, the Demon King stabbed him from behind, causing chaos and discord to persist across the 6 realms. However, even though Buddhism was destroyed, Shu Tian's spirit scattered into 72 parts across the cosmos. Natural disasters continued to shake the human world, never ceasing. At one point, when Jin saw their house starting to collapse, he quickly told his brother to close the door and stop talking nonsense. As the roof of their house was about to cave in, Jin knew they had to act quickly, or their lives would be over. At almost the same moment, their father barely escaped a pillar that nearly fell on his legs. They had to face a demon who arrived with extraordinary power. With fierce determination, they fought with all their might, though many of them suffered severe injuries. Asmodeus, the demon, shattered the ground beneath him, even slamming Omni until he was crushed by a collapsing pillar. Yet Jin swore to protect his father. When Asmodeus jumped to end their lives, Omni, though injured, was still able to protect them all. With his remaining strength, Omni threw them upward, blocking Asmodeus's attack, and used the chain on his staff to hold the demon back from sacrificing them all. Even though Asmodeus damaged his weapon, Omni didn't give up so easily. With one clever move, Omni managed to bring the demon down, and used the heavenly chain to turn the surrounding pillars into giant fists that crushed Asmodeus. The demon was pushed back but remained dangerous. Jin, almost losing hope, began to realize that they had to escape. Finally, they escaped to a safer area, passing through a dense forest. After 2 hours of exploring a mysterious cave, they arrived at an ancient relic belonging to the gods. There, Omni began to unseal it, signaling to release the vines that covered 2 legendary swords. As soon as Jin and Omni lifted the swords, a golden aura illuminated the surroundings, and remnants of the god of war began to rise into the air. Omni revealed that the swords would awaken the god dormant within Rio. Rio's destiny, hidden all this time, was the key to saving the world. Like a fate that had long been written, their journey had only just begun. As the cave began to collapse, they immediately felt the danger approaching. Without a second thought, they ran away, trying to avoid the falling debris that came closer and closer. Meanwhile, the secrets within the cave began to reveal themselves as the hidden aura of charm finally activated. They ran as fast as they could, crossing a bridge that connected them to the dark, dangerous center of the volcano. But Omni, always alert, sensed something strange as the cave ceiling started to fall and as Asmodeus slammed his face into the ground. However, despite the worsening situation, Omni remained calm. Quickly, Omni used magic to distract the demon just enough to free himself from the grip that nearly crushed his head. In the midst of the chaos, Omni prayed to the heavens for enough strength to survive. Not long after, around Asmodeus, magical energy began to emit a powerful aura, as if trapping the demon, and threw him into the blazing lava below. Through the dust and smoke, Jin felt relief seeing his father still alive, but his happiness soon turned to horror. A hand suddenly pierced through Omni's chest, and a beautiful girl, with a cold smile, revealed that she had been waiting for this day for 1,000 years. In his final moments, Omni struggled to remain strong. He begged Jin to protect Rio, the brother he had always considered useless, and then used a forbidden teleportation spell to send them both across the stars. But just as the demon princess was about to kill Jin, their souls ascended, soaring toward the sky, while Omni could only hope that his children would survive in a realm half-human, half-demon. 13 years had passed since that incident, and on Rio's 14th birthday, Jin began his Demon Slayer graduation ritual. With high hopes, Jin released his mana, surrounding Rio with the power of the gods until the binding seal finally broke and the mana began to be absorbed. As the gods started to acknowledge Rio's strength, Jin proceeded to reveal the relic left by their father. However, Rio could only wonder what that object truly was. At that moment, a scream for help shattered the silence. Gandalf, an old man, frantically begged the kids for assistance, promising to pay them with his life savings if they could save his daughter from a threatening cat demon. But Jin, ever cautious, sensed something strange. He responded sharply, stating that he'd rather attend Gandalf's daughter's funeral than fall into a trap. However, when Gandalf's bag fell and a golden bell rolled out, Jin was shocked. It was a bell strikingly similar to the kind usually used by demon girls. With a serious expression, Jin immediately demanded that Gandalf reveal where he found it. Gandalf finally shared a story about an abandoned house in a village shrouded in thick fog, a place where anyone who entered disappeared without a trace. But as Jin turned to discuss further, he noticed something suspicious. His brother, who had been nearby, had suddenly vanished. Just then, a fox girl almost beheaded Jin before her attack missed, and she vanished into the mist. Feeling cornered, Jin began to spin, creating a tornado that cleared the fog around them. Seeing this, the fox girl pleaded for Jin to spare her life, promising to do whatever he asked. but Jin only felt disgust looking at her form. As Jin turned away, the fox girl leaped to end his life. However, Jin activated his reverse blade and struck her. But before everything ended, the fox girl revealed that her brother intended to kill Jin. At the same time, Ryo was struggling to fend off attacks from the cat demon. As the demon attacked with swift movements, Ryo managed to dodge and close the distance. Ryo threw the demon far and used his staff to break its arm. However, the demon vanished, moving faster than Ryo could see, destroying his staff in the process. Just as Jin intended to save his brother, Ryo's staff emitted a golden light. When Ryo grabbed it, he threw the sacred staff at the demon, and the beam of light signaled to the 6 spectral realms that the war god, after 1,000 years, had been reborn. The cat demon realized Ryo had launched the staff before losing consciousness and attempted to flee. However, Jin appeared just in time, threatening to end its life and questioning it about the golden bell he had seen. When Jin rang the bell again, the effect forced the demon to confess. The demon revealed that the bell foretold the war god's rebirth, and to extract the shard of his soul, Jin would have to kill the demon's slayer. Suddenly, the orb flew on its own, lodging deep in Jin's throat. Trying to protect his unconscious brother, Jin ran, but a golden light exploded around them. At the same time, the fairies realized their time had come and teleported to the human realm. At sunrise, Jin congratulated Ryo for becoming a demon slayer, awakening his special weapon. But as Ryo went to claim it, the sacred staff shrank back to its original size. The fairies requested they hand it over, but even though Jin was suffering from internal bleeding after the explosion, he still drew his sword, ready to strike them down. The girl dropped her weapon and threatened to burn Jin if he moved. However, a second fairy appeared between them, saying they were on Jin's side. As the fairy cast a healing spell on Jin's arm, he introduced himself as Sorrow and revealed they had been sent to retrieve the war god's iron. On the other side was Xiaoba, the foolish pig, who kept babbling non-stop. Despite being a bit shocked by Xiaoba's stupidity, both of her brothers were still glad because, if anything, Xiaoba was pretty charming, one might say. Sorrow, who was eager to continue his explanation, finally unveiled the mystery that had cloaked their past. Long ago, in the Age of Gods, Shu was killed by the god of races, Sorrow said with a serious tone. However, even in death, his soul did not simply vanish. Instead, Shu split his soul into 72 fragments scattered around the world, hoping that one day he could rise again and become the Buddha, saving the gods. But of course, there was a huge problem to face. Sorrow continued, the Demon King, who is never satisfied, will target us. The Demon King wants to revive Shu again, but not for any noble purpose. He intends to make Shu his servant, as Shu was the one who once destroyed the world. Ryo, who was listening to all this, began to realize that what Sorrow said might be true. Ryo nodded slowly, deciding to hand over his precious magic staff, feeling as though it was the right thing to do. Ryo apologized to Jin, as it seemed he had lost the precious gift from their father. But Xiaoba, with her ever skeptical and stubborn nature, immediately snapped at them. What's this? You gave me a fake staff. A confused Ryo looked back at his magic staff, and at that moment the golden aura surrounded it again, as if providing its own answer to the doubts that arose. Sorrow, who seemed to understand where the conversation was headed, explained that the Shenzhen iron they carried would only awaken under someone with a pure heart. Jin, who never cared about such things, quickly dismissed the idea, thinking that his personality was no different from his hard, flat chest. So why should I care? He muttered, glancing at the staff that was now glowing even brighter. With no other choice, Jin finally commanded Ryo to come along if he valued his life. In his heart, Ryo began to wonder if all of this had been planned by their father from the start. But maybe this would be fun, he thought. A journey with these two eccentric fairies is bound to be interesting. They prepared to leave home forever. Ryo activated the compass within his magic staff, and as expected, it pointed toward a distant valley. Sorrow, who seemed to have been waiting for this moment, called up to them, the hovercraft carrier is ready. Let's start this adventure. Several hours passed, and they finally stopped to eat. The table was filled with food, and they all began devouring the meat eagerly. Xiaoba, always curious, suddenly asked, Hey, are you all secretly African kids or something? How come you keep eating so much? Jin, now full, just shrugged and replied, We eat only because we're afraid that if we don't, we might end up as flat as you. Xiaoba, feeling insulted, reacted immediately. It's not about being flat. Any stick can rise if it's the right size. Outside, in the quiet and desolate desert, a beautiful girl fell hard onto the ground. Fortunately, the autopilot on their hovercraft almost ran into her but stopped just in time, avoiding danger. Jin, curious, quickly ran toward the girl and found her. He lifted her into his arms and quickly realized that she was badly injured. Why don't you want to go home? Asked Jin, looking at the wounds on the girl's body. But Xiaoba, who seemed more concerned with her own affairs, immediately forbade Jin from bringing the girl into the hovercraft. Don't bring strangers along, she snapped. However, Jin just smirked. Are you jealous because this girl isn't as thin as a cutting board like you? He teased, though he felt something strange about the situation. The beautiful girl, now beginning to regain consciousness, slowly opened her eyes. Jin, who had initially planned to massage her aching body, was instead stopped by Sorrow. Who is this girl? Why was she stabbed with a knife? Asked Sorrow, curious about her story. The girl finally introduced herself. "I'm Jing," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I was stabbed by a group of bandits before I managed to escape. I'm scared. I have to go back to that dark cave." Her voice trailed off, and tears began to flow from her eyes. Jin could only sigh, feeling that their adventure had only just begun. However, Jin vowed to protect Jing, as they also planned to gather fragments from the same cave. When she saw his magic staff, Jing felt happy, remembering the sacrifices made for that celestial weapon. Jing knew that behind all of this, the cameraman had also risked his life to capture an extraordinary shot. Night fell, and as Jin was having strange dreams, Jing tried to throw her net toward Rio. But as soon as the door opened, she quickly hid her rope, feeling panicked. Outside, Saro, feeling the warmth of his body after his bath, sensed something off about Jing, making him suspicious. Pretending he was in the wrong room, Saro wondered if he'd accidentally walked into an insane asylum. Morning arrived, and Jin prepared to show off his powerful moves to Jing. However, he couldn't find her anywhere. Growing worried, Jin thought bandits might have kidnapped her again, so he swore to rescue Jing. Meanwhile, Rio was furious after discovering that Jing had stolen his small staff. Xiaoba, too, was losing her mind as Jing finally arrived at the cave. Seeing her sister for the first time since the abduction, Jing was shocked at how they had tied up her little sister. Jing handed the staff to Haoming and exchanged it for her sister, sealing their deal. But after releasing her sister and starting to leave, an ugly loser with a big nose, looking like he was battling addiction and chemotherapy at the same time, blocked their path. Their leader clarified that they only returned her sister but had never granted them permission to leave. When Jing tried to throw her rope toward his face, it bounced back and tangled around her own feet, causing her to fall to the ground and lose the staff. As the second demon approached, Jing pretended to chant a spell to scare him, then sprayed liquid into his mouth. Swiftly, she grabbed her sister and began to flee. But before reaching the exit, her weakened sister collapsed. As the demons closed in, Jing tried to create a net to trap them. However, Haoming slashed through the net, nearly slicing both sisters in two. When the second demon wondered what they were after, Jing's sister tried to kick him, but he caught her foot and began to stretch it. At the same time, Jing managed to dodge Haoming's sword and threw her net at the big-nosed demon, tying him to the wall. But as Haoming attempted to cut him in half, the initially boring situation turned into a more intense spectacle, and Jing tried to throw her net at Haoming's face. However, Haoming summoned stones from the ground to crush her body, knocking her unconscious. With Jing too exhausted to run, the big-nosed demon decided to cast a spell, successfully trapping them within a barrier that made escape impossible. Outside the cave, Saro was trying to find the right route on his device, while Jin suggested they split up before entering the cave. But as they ran through the corridors, Rio started to feel suspicious because everything looked the same, and he wondered if they were lost. Jin, on the other hand, sensed Jing's scent very close by, and when they reached the center of the cave, they saw that Jing had been captured, while Haoming was attempting something horrific toward the two girls. Rio immediately got angry and wanted to defend Jing, but Jin stopped him as the barrier began to fade. Just as Haoming prepared to carry out his plan, Jing threw a net that hit him in the face, forcing him to retreat. But that only made him angrier, and Haoming summoned stones from the ground. However, her brother shielded Jing and sustained a fatal wound. Seeing him dying, Jin jumped to kill Haoming, but Haoming managed to block his sword, causing him to fall to the side. As Rio tried to strike Koro's head, he easily dodged and slapped him, knocking him down due to Rio's weakness. At the same time, Xiaoba blasted a hole into the cave. Seeing Jing's horribly injured face, Xiaoba released an energy blast to destroy her, but Jin shielded her, and the blast instead created a large hole in the cave. While Xiaoba questioned whether Jin had lost his mind, Jin tried to explain that Jing was merely a victim. Rio, on the other hand, was determined to keep things simple and tried to stop Xiaoba from launching another blast. At that moment, they realized their enemies were protected by a barrier, and Cyril revealed that they had acquired one of the fragments. Haoming, wondering if his repressed hormones were making him irritable, angered Xiaoba, and Xiaoba was ready to obliterate them all. However, Jin quickly intervened and told Jing to run away. When Rio planned to help, Koro tried to stop him, but Jin threatened to behead him. To even the fight, Haoming decided to call for backup, and a group of useless lackeys surrounded them. But as they flew into attack, Cyril summoned a tornado that swept them out of the cave. Even so, Haoming remained determined to resist and tried to trap the girls within stone. But Cyril summoned wind to push them away. As Koro flew toward them with his sword, Jin immediately blocked his attack, while Xiaoba deflected the lackey's dagger before slashing at Koro. In an instant, Cyril unleashed lightning, and as Haoming attempted to trap them in a King Kong barrier, Xiaoba punched him into the sky, while Cyril summoned thunder that struck Haoming right then and there. With Haoming electrocuted, Jin quickly rushed to take Jing away, hoping to find a safer place for them. As they walked away from the cave, Jing returned the staff to Rio, apologizing for stealing it in the first place. Inside the cave, Haoming appeared before Cyril and immediately attacked him. However, Cyril quickly dodged and countered by releasing red flames. Haoming managed to shield himself with rock, causing the flames to rebound toward him. As Haoming tried to take advantage of the moment, Zhaoba came to assist, blasting Haoming to corner him. Unyielding, Haoming threw rocks at them. Cyril tried to hold them back with a water shield, but the rocks pierced through, forcing them to dodge. Seeing an opportunity, Zhaoba launched another blast, but Haoming countered with rocks, causing the blast to reverse and strike them instead. Despite being hit by a fragment of energy, Haoming could still control the surrounding rocks for protection. As Haoming began boasting about his supposed invincibility, Cyril had a brilliant idea. Cyril released lightning into the water, electrocuting Haoming instantly. Zhaoba then launched a finishing attack that finally ice-skyed Haoming. With Haoming finally dead, a soul fragment appeared before them. Zhaoba took it without hesitation and quickly rushed outside to regroup with the others. Outside the cave, just as Jin felt they were finally safe, Koro suddenly jumped out from behind the rocks, but Ryo reacted immediately, knocking him to the ground. Koro tried to counterattack, but Jin swiftly parried him and managed to gain control over the situation. Koro then unleashed ghostly tentacles, and they clashed fiercely once more. Jin skillfully slashed at Koro before leaping back, narrowly avoiding Koro's tentacles. Despite his exhaustion, Jin kept holding his ground while Ryo tried to fend off Koro's brutal assault, but Koro landed a hard elbow strike, trapping Jin in a barrier, and kicked Ryo roughly, almost mocking his helplessness. Desperate, Jin tried to slash through the barrier with all his strength, but Koro was distracted, noticing the sword looked familiar. Jiying threw a net to hinder him, but Koro easily sliced through it. At that moment, Jiying began to realize her energy was running low. Koro seized the opportunity to chant a spell, turning Jin's body into stone. Growing more desperate, Jin urged Ryo to escape, saying that with his terrible luck, he might just end up trapped again.
However, Ryo refused to leave without his brother. Ryo started punching the barrier with all his strength, but it still didn't work. Koro just laughed and tossed him aside. In the midst of frustration, Ryo began to doubt himself, wondering if he would always be a useless loser. That's when his small staff suddenly glowed with a golden light. Jen told Ryo to touch the metal, and when he did, the golden energy transformed into a powerful staff in his hand. Without a second thought, Ryo swung the staff at the barrier, shattering it into pieces. However, as the barrier broke, Ryo fell to the ground. Seeing that, Koro was furious. He kicked Ryo and grabbed the staff, but it immediately turned back into a regular stick in his hand. When Ryo saw that his brother was finally free, his body couldn't take it anymore, and he passed out. Jen, driven by emotion, immediately slashed Koro's hand in retaliation. As Koro tried to counterattack with his ghostly tentacles, Jen managed to cut them and destroy his barrier. In the middle of the fight, Koro began to realize that Jen had the same resilience as his father. But before he could think any further, Jen delivered a double slash that drained all his energy. Realizing he was defeated, Koro finally revealed that his boss was hunting Jen and wouldn't stop until Jen was captured. At that moment, the sound of a tiny bell began to ring, a sign of death calling for Koro. As soon as Koro died, the second shard appeared from his body. That night in the car, Sero told Jiying that her sister could not be cured with eternal magic. Ryo felt guilty and decided to go out to be alone. Meanwhile, Sero suggested that Jiying seal her sister's primordial spirit until she found a teacher who could heal and place her spirit into a new body. Not wanting to lose her sister, Jiying agreed. Sero chanted a spell, and Jiying's sister's body turned into a ball of energy before entering Jiying's ring. Outside, Ryo bitterly told Jen that he felt useless and not even worthy of having the ancient staff because he couldn't protect anyone. But Jen reassured him, saying that Ryo was special and needed to believe in himself, as he returned the staff to him. In the car, as the shards began to merge into Ryo's staff, Sero explained that the staff was indeed a vessel for those shards, and Zhaoba warned that Ryo had to protect it with his life. At that moment, Jiying offered to join the group, saying that her boring life needed a new adventure. Jen, smiling, welcomed her presence, even if it meant Jiying would remain a useless maiden forever. The next day, when they arrived in the city, Jen began to realize how dire Ryo's condition was. Ryo could barely move because of the weight of the magical staff, making Jen worry about how they would find Earth Sage, the spirit healer renowned for his ability to brew spirit medicines. In the midst of that confusion, Jiying suddenly appeared, her face looking weary from the hot sun, and Jen couldn't help but think how his sister seemed like a useless loser. They finally reached a clothing store, and Jen was puzzled about how Ryo would get treatment there. But without hesitation, Zhaoba immediately decided to go inside. As soon as they stepped in, a fat and disgusting man named Sage tried to tell Zhaoba that this shop didn't sell boys' clothes. However, Zhaoba couldn't stand it and shouted at him to open his eyes and stop talking nonsense. Once Sage came to his senses, his eyes immediately landed on Jiying, and awkwardly, Sage tried to offer her the best bikini to complement what he claimed was her beautiful body. Of course, Zhaoba didn't hold back. She beat him up thoroughly. When Sage finally woke up, he started telling them that the underworld had been in chaos since the heavenly realm was sealed, and no immortals had visited his shop in years. In his confusion, Sage began pulling toys off the shelves, and suddenly the store transformed into an herbal medicine shop. When Sage wondered why they came here, Zhaoba immediately asked for senzu beans. Without a second thought, Sage took them out of a bottle, and Zhaoba quickly snatched the beans, nearly choking Rio in her haste to shove them into his mouth. Not long after that, Zhaoba started to wonder about the open industrial furnaces around the city, realizing that the heat was extraordinary, like the flames of hell. As soon as he saw it, Sage finally told them that a huge meteor had fallen on the city more than 100 years ago, right at the site of the former industrial furnace. Since that incident, every day felt like summer in the city, with the meteor becoming a constant source of heat that kept the industrial furnace burning, which in turn continuously provided warmth for the entire city. Zero began to wonder why they had not tried to calm the situation. Then Sage told him that the area was now occupied by Evil Cloud, the ruler of the city, and the boss of a rather notorious demon clan. To find out more about his evil plans, Zero asked Ryo to use his staff to create a signal. Carefully, Ryo began to spin his staff, sending out a wave of energy strong enough to spread throughout the store. At that moment, Zero sensed something unusual. The meteor seemed to stir, and Zero realized that another fragment was inside the area they were entering. Not long after, Ryo's staff fell, and they noticed that the necklace that had been on his body was now broken. Zhaoba, who was ready to take action, started to move toward the meteor, while Jen offered assistance and told Jiying to stay with Ryo. A moment later, they arrived at the targeted area, only to realize that the building was filled with extremely tight security systems. When Zhaoba wondered if they could sneak in without being detected, Jen quickly made a hole in the wall. But immediately, more than 100 security guards rushed to the entrance, making the situation even more tense. Meanwhile, inside the store, Ryo was still lying sick. But in his spiritual realm, the god of war was battling demons until the demon king stabbed him from behind, shattering his body into fragments that suddenly appeared before Ryo. As Ryo tried to grab one of them, the spirit of Haoming appeared and said that it was demonic energy that Ryo needed to transform himself from a useless loser into the most powerful demon king ever. At that moment, Koro appeared and sarcastically said that Ryo had nothing to lose because he was already considered a loser, and in the end, everyone would abandon him because he was worthless. But Ryo insisted that he did not need the power of demons, and at that moment, his staff began to glow with a bright golden light. The immense energy contained within it shattered the ground beneath him. The voice of the god of war echoed in Ryo's ears, telling him that the primordial spirit would stay with him forever, giving Ryo power greater than ever before. When Ryo finally regained consciousness, he was shocked to see Jiying's melon really close to his face. Unable to hold back his embarrassment, Ryo blushed, realizing that he was way too close to someone he liked. However, when the staff fell from his pocket, Jiying quickly picked it up and vanished from his sight. Worried that she might steal it again, Ryo immediately decided to follow her. But soon after, Jiying returned and playfully wrapped the staff around Ryo's head like a necklace, saying that the thread would never break this time. On the other side, Zhaoba immediately punched the teeth of one of the security guards who tried to attack her. But as soon as a few other guards moved to strike, Jen swiftly cut them all down without mercy. Once they made it inside, Jen noticed a girl who seemed fascinated by all the portraits in the room. In his heart, Jen began to wonder if she was a goddess. But before he could think any further, a man appeared before him. And at that moment, Jen realized it was Evil Cloud. Desperate to defeat him, Jen flew forward with his sword, but suddenly he touched a blazing fire, forcing him to leap back as quickly as possible. Evil Cloud began moving toward them, and flames ignited all around him. As he stepped forward, Evil Cloud grinned, thinking that their flesh would taste delicious in his mouth. Not long after, Evil revealed that one of the meteorite fragments was inside his body, and he swore to keep it forever. Feeling he could defeat him, Jen charged again with his sword, but even his attack couldn't penetrate the barrier created by Evil. At that moment, Evil hurled flames toward him. Quickly, Jen managed to shield himself with his sword, though he was ultimately thrown back hard by the ensuing massive explosion. Fortunately, Zero appeared and saved him with a gust of wind that softened the impact of the blast. Realizing that Jen had lost consciousness, Zero started to investigate more about Evil's plans. Zero tried to tell Evil that the meteorite was still active and could easily destroy the city if not cooled down. However, Evil thought he had a better plan, and revealed that he was going to activate the forbidden jutsu, Fire Bite, a magic so powerful it could shake their world. When Zero wondered what he was truly after, Evil calmly replied that his plan was to destroy the Eternal Palace, home to all the fairy clans, as revenge for the destruction of his own city. Hearing this, Zhaoba was consumed with rage and immediately launched herself at Evil. But suddenly, a burning rope shot toward her, and although Zhaoba managed to deflect it, the flames reignited and nearly engulfed her. Luckily, she managed to leap away before the fire exploded. However, as her weapon became wrapped in flames, the intense heat began to damage it. In desperation, not wanting to lose her weapon, Zhaoba tried to signal Zero to cool it down. Zero threw water, hoping to extinguish the flames. Unfortunately, even the water couldn't subdue the fire, which only grew larger. Realizing that Zhaoba might lose her entire arm, she jumped back at the last second, saving herself from more severe damage. When Jen regained consciousness, he immediately decided to challenge Evil again, despite the worsening situation. Jen ordered Zhaoba to run, but Evil, of course, wasn't about to let her go. Quickly, Evil launched a massive fireball in their direction, but Jen swiftly slashed through it with his sword. Urging Zhaoba to flee, she started to run, hoping to survive. Meanwhile, in the city, chaos began to spread. As people saw the industrial furnace erupting, lava started pouring into the city. At that moment, Rio realized his brother might be destroyed in this disaster. Rio wondered if the people out there would make it out alive. Inside the building, Evil continued attacking with fireballs, but Jen refused to give up. Moving quickly, Jen threw his sword through the smoke and caught it from behind, striking Evil Cloud with precision until his body shattered. However, soon after, a burning rope coiled around his ankle, yanking him to the ground. Still, Jen did not give up and began to swing his sword with all his strength, attempting to cut Evil into pieces. But Evil was too strong. He punched Jen, sending him crashing into the wall, arrogantly stating that Jen was too weak and desperate to challenge him. As Evil prepared to send him to another world by throwing a fireball to burn Jen, an ice shield suddenly appeared right in front of them, blocking the flames at the last second. But the ice started to melt, and they noticed the wound on Sero's neck, bleeding. Realizing there was no other chance, Sero summoned a thick cloud of smoke, allowing them to escape. But Evil already knew what Sero wanted. He took Sero's blood and quickly wrote a spell. A symbol appeared, and the meteorite began to rise into the air. In front of their eyes, flames started to surge toward the meteorite, and Zhaoba wondered how they could possibly stop all this. As the blazing fireball descended toward the city, they began to run in fear. People in the city also started to scramble for shelter, while Rio wondered if his brother had already become a roasted corpse. However, Jiying remained confident that Jen was still alive, and she shielded Rio from the approaching explosion. Realizing they might soon become roasted themselves, Jiying suggested finding a place to hide. But as they started to run away, Rio seemed to lose his mind, running around aimlessly. He didn't seem to know where to go, but soon Rio spotted a little girl, terrified. He quickly rescued her, jumping aside just before the explosion hit where they had been standing, barely escaping destruction. At that moment, Sero began running toward the shelter, and Rio found Jen unconscious. In the shelter, Sero started to think hard, wondering how Evil had been able to control the industrial furnace for so many years. Sage finally mentioned that everything might be connected to the core. Everyone realized that there was only one way to stop the chaos. Someone had to sneak in and steal the core. And who else but Jiying? She agreed, feeling that this was their only hope to save the city. That night, Jiying began to sneak through the vents toward the target location. As she moved cautiously, she spotted two men spying on her secretary. When their attention was diverted, Jiying took the opportunity, throwing her net to clear the way and quickly knocking down one of the men before choking the other. In another room, Jiying swiftly shattered the secretary's mirror and pressed him against the wall, demanding to know where the core was hidden. Out of fear, the secretary gave false information, saying the key to the secret room was inside his bag, but it was just a trick. The secretary quickly struck Jiying's arm, making her lose grip and hit her ribcage. The secretary tried to fight back, almost landing a hit on Jiying, but she skillfully performed a split to dodge. Jiying quickly launched her net, trapping the secretary against the wall. As he started to empty his bag, she checked it immediately and found that it didn't contain the secret room key. Hoping to get a confession, Jiying decided to initiate a legendary plot developing session, straight out of the anime world. Meanwhile, outside the shelter, buildings began to crumble. Debris fell from the roof, but Evil kept throwing fireballs. Sero began to think that Evil had truly lost his sanity. They realized they couldn't hide forever. So Zhaoba decided to reveal her weapon. Sero explained to Rio that they were just trying to buy time until Jiying found the core. After a while, the secretary finally gave up the password to the secret room. However, Jiying wished she could spend a bit more time with him because the secretary was surprisingly fun to toy with. As soon as Jiying entered the secret room, the alarm system immediately went off. Suddenly, a Terminator appeared before her, identifying her as an intruder, but Jiying quickly leapt away, dodging the attack. Meanwhile, in the city, Evil began searching for the fairies. He deflected an explosion from Zhaoba and soared into the air. Believing they all had to be eradicated, Evil hurled a massive fireball in their direction. However, Sero quickly threw up a shield to break the fireball, while Zhaoba began firing shots. Yet Evil easily deflected all of their attacks. As Zhaoba wondered what revenge truly meant, Evil's rage grew even stronger. He unleashed a fierce flame to annihilate them, but Sero summoned his ice barrier and managed to deflect the fire. At that moment, Rio's staff struck the ground, creating a shield that protected them. as Rio appeared before their eyes. However, he was already exhausted after using almost all his magic, and Evil landed right in front of him. Rio tried to persuade him to stop the attack, explaining that the city was already on the brink of destruction. At that point, Evil started to realize all the destruction he had caused and felt utterly alone. He was a mad threat who had lost everything in his life, even after being trapped under rubble. A fragment suddenly appeared, granting him the burning power of a god. However, Evil felt that power was only useful for revenge. He blamed the Fairy Clan for creating the protective field that deflected the Demon King's fire meteor. When Evil tried to destroy their eternal palace, the meteor instead veered off to the field and crashed into the underworld, destroying their city and even causing his wife's death. That's what drove Evil to seek revenge. He was convinced that wiping out the two fairies was the perfect way to begin. Fueled by increasing rage, Evil prepared a blast of fire and hurled it at Jauba, but Rio quickly threw up a golden warrior barrier to shield her. Even so, each use of magic made Rio weaker, and he began to tell Evil that he wasn't so different from the Fairy Clan he hated. After all, Evil was also driven by revenge, and killing everyone wouldn't bring back the love he had lost in his life. However, Evil grew more and more out of control and soon transformed into a giant monster. Furious, Evil swore to kill every immortal he encountered, even striking Rio down for talking too much. Meanwhile, Jiying managed to defeat the Terminator, but as she threw her web to grab the core, she started to feel frozen and was forced to retreat. At that moment, she saw the machine in front of her and wondered what it really was. Elsewhere, Rio survived the heavy blow, and the golden barrier saved him from a harsh impact to his head. However, he was already too weak, and Evil began trying to convince him to give up, saying it was the only choice left for a loser like him. Even so, Rio refused to surrender. When Evil attempted to wipe them all out, he noticed the signal from the core and realized that was the way to stop it. With determination, Evil prepared a huge fireball and blasted the entire area before heading toward the signal. As the smoke started to clear, Rio deactivated his barrier, and Sero realized they were lucky to be alive. Determined to protect those Rio cared about, he declared that he would head to the furnace. Sero decided to enhance his magic, and in an instant, Rio vanished before their eyes. Meanwhile, in the secret chamber, Jiying sensed someone's presence and quickly hid as a new enemy arrived. Realizing it was a demon, she wondered why the demon had come to the underworld. Without hesitation, the demon immediately grabbed the core. At the same moment, Evil appeared before the demon, demanding the core, but Beastman threatened to beat him until he couldn't move anymore. Eager to get his core back, Evil threw a fireball at Beastman, but he leapt aside and engaged in hand-to-hand combat with Evil. Soon after, Beastman transformed into his Super Bowl form, and Evil knew he was in big trouble. As Beastman attacked, Evil was sent flying. Finally, Beastman ended the fight quicker than expected, reverting back to his human form.